Hello, everyone. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. One quick announcement before we get started. The name of the podcast has been changed to the Drive Fitness Program. If you're curious why I made a slight change to the name, I explain it in one of our exclusive Patreon episodes, so you can go check that out at patreon.com/drivefitness. Also, don't forget to follow us on Spotify, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. My guest for today's episode is Morgan Benton. Morgan studied sociology at the University of Richmond, and then he got his PhD in information systems at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Morgan is currently a professor at James Madison University in the Department of Integrated Science and Technology. While I attended JMU, I took 3 of Morgan's classes, and he was my Capstone advisor, which ISAT students work on over the course of 2 years to complete their program. During our interview, we discuss how he and the rest of JMU have had to adapt their teaching methods with the current global pandemic and how online education has been going for him this semester. We also discuss some of his general teaching philosophies and some of the capstone projects that he is currently working on. Similar to his classes, we had to record this episode over Zoom. This was my first remote podcast episode, and it went pretty well, except for my audio actually got picked up by my headphones instead of my microphone. So unfortunately, there's a little bit of drop with my audio quality. However, Morgan's audio came through crystal clear, and we had an amazing conversation. So I think the episode turned out great. I hope you guys enjoy it too. How has teaching during COVID been? How has the lockdown been for you?
So I'm teaching all online. I've got about 58 students this semester. We switched over to teaching all online in the middle of the spring semester, and I didn't have a strategy for it. And I think it was all in all just a really bad experience, just not engaging. And I think a lot of people just kind of quietly disappeared, and wasn't able to sort of track them down. But so for the fall, what I've done is I took all of the, say 60 students that I had, and I broke them up into small groups of 3 to 5. And I meet with every group every week. So I have an hour-long meeting, like small group meeting, basically with everybody in all of my classes every week. That way, I don't lose track of anybody, right? We take notes, and there's a video recording, and we take attendance. So, we're all keeping track of each other to make sure everybody's okay and people are coping. I mean, some people have gotten sick. Some people had family members get sick. There have been people who have had to work extra hours, people who have lost jobs. It's been stressful for pretty much everybody involved. And then on top of that, JMU can't decide whether they're going to do classes on campus or online. And so I told the department before the semester started that I was not going to come to campus, that, I was going to teach 100% online. There are plenty of people who decided to teach face-to-face, and they transformed the campus. And then people showed up in late August, and cases began to spike. Like they had set aside, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 dorms to be quarantined. If you had a positive test, they sent you to one of these dorms, and you had a room. I don't know if it was to yourself or not, but they put you in a dorm for like 10 days or 2 weeks or something until you were better. And then they would let you out. Cases just spiked, and they filled up almost all of their quarantine space. And so, I don't know, first week in September, they just decided to send everybody, to completely stop doing face-to-face classes.
It sounded like chaos for anyone who's a freshman, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you live on campus, it's been pretty rough. And then, you could apply for an exception if you were worried about, getting a family member at home sick. So not everybody had to move out, but most people did. And then at the last week of September, they said, okay, we're going to try it again. And so they brought everybody back in the first week of October to campus, and just switching back and forth is just not good or
Yeah.
efficient for everyone. They canceled fall break and they brought everybody back. And then I have a vague feeling that they stopped having face-to-face classes again, largely in early to mid-November, but they have asked that nobody come back after Thanksgiving break. So, I mean, I've been spending, anywhere from 6 to 8, 9, 10, there have probably been some days when I've spent 11 or 12 hours straight in Zoom.
Yeah, I felt so guilty when I was texting you. Like I was asking you, do you want to do a Zoom call? And right as I was messaging you, I realized, oh man, he's probably in Zoom calls all day long. We we gotta wait. We gotta wait till he's on a break, because it just seems like overwhelming to live your life like this, right? I mean, it's kind of weird not seeing you, right? It's kind of weird not being able to interact with people the same way, especially with students. My girlfriend's in grad school right now, and I don't know, you can get behind so fast. That's really awesome. You're meeting with every student in groups like that on a weekly basis to make sure no one gets left behind, right? I mean, it would be super easy for those kids to just not keep up with it.
And I think it's been successful. I mean, I have a couple of people who dropped midway through the semester. I don't know if you heard, there was an explosion in Harrisonburg. I think they finally decided it was a gas leak, but where like Wendy's and El Charo are on Main Street. Behind Wendy's, there's a little strip mall. Like between Wendy's and the roller skating rink, there's like a little strip mall, and there's a music studio and international food store and so on. That whole little strip mall just completely leveled. And it was on like a Saturday or Sunday morning that it happened. I don't think anybody was killed, but one of my students was in a 5K or a 10K race, and they were running right by there at the time, and he was hit by the explosion. So he hurt his arm. It's been a rough semester. It's just been a lot of stuff going on. But even that guy has managed to keep things moving and come away from the semester with something that I think he can be proud of. So yeah, it's been tough. It's been long. It's been a lot of work, but I feel like people are having a respectable experience.
By the way, if it ever looks like I'm not looking at you, you're kind of over here and my camera's over here. So I feel like it gets confusing.
I've been doing Zoom so long, I'm used to people looking every which way, so it's fine.
Yeah. So it seems exhausting to like record these lectures and put them up on YouTube, right? But do you think that there is some future value in this online program? Maybe if you were to do this in the spring and the kids were to come in, you'd already have all these YouTube videos ready to go.
Oh, absolutely.
Out there. It's all this work right now, but do you think it might have like a long-term benefit for the way you teach?
I will absolutely reuse some of the content from this semester in the spring. Not just the recordings, but even just slides and things like that I've been preparing.
Because it seemed like even when I was there, we were starting to move towards a flipped classroom where teachers would record their lectures. They would assign the lecture for homework, and then you'd come into class and like work on some sort of schoolwork type things. So it seemed like we were trying to move to a place where we were all putting lectures online. Maybe this will kind of just accelerate things. And even when we can go back to normal, you might have all these lectures just saved up from this time. Do you think it's going to affect the way you teach from here on out?
I like having the small group meetings. You know my style, right? I don't give tests. Most of the time, there are no grades in my classes. And so if you're not motivated on your own by the content, like when you were in 340 or 348, right? And you did the first iteration of your fitness app, I didn't need to worry about you having the motivation to open up your computer and work on writing code. There's plenty of people for whom that's not true. And so my teaching style makes it relatively easy for people who just aren't that motivated or interested or have other things that are more pressing to put the stuff that we do in my classes on the back burner. And, that is what it is. Everybody has busy, complex lives. And I may be one of the few professors who doesn't think that my class should be the center of your universe when you're in it. First of all, I think every semester is an opportunity for you to have something new to put in your portfolio, something that you can show to other people in the future to demonstrate your capacity to bring value to an enterprise, to demonstrate your skills, your talents, your responsibility, your grit, whatever it is, right? Every semester is an opportunity to do that. So I would really love for everyone to come away from the semester with some sort of tangible thing that they're proud of, that they would want to show people that they can use to make themselves more useful in the world. But also want people to come away from the semester with the idea that maybe this stuff is not as intimidating as I thought it was. And I know that if I stick to it and ask questions at the right times and have the discipline to do certain things, that they will be able to make this a lifelong profession's not the word, but something that they can do for the rest of their lives.
So yeah, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about your teaching method, because you're not extremely like grade focused, and sometimes students take advantage of that. But then for me, for instance, right, I was able to walk into your classroom and just absorb so much knowledge that semester because you weren't putting a quiz in my face, every class and kind of making me jump through hoops. It really allowed me to actually sit down and like build the framework of an application. What kind of made you decide to take a less grade focused approach to teaching? Was it like a book that you read, or is it some psychology?
Yes.
Something that goes into it that changes the way people view school and learning?
All of the above. Let me start by calling attention to something that you said about students taking advantage of my style, because I feel like that throws a little bit of shade on people who do not choose to spend their time doing the things on my syllabus, right? When I think take advantage, I think that they seize the opportunity. I think of seizing the opportunity to really get into the content in a low stress, low risk environment, right? Because, what have you got to lose in my class, right? You're not going to get a bad grade. I'm not going to treat you mean. That may seem like a no-brainer, but, you've been in enough classes with professors who make you feel like you're, this big, to know that that's not necessarily a given. There's a broad impression in the culture that, students are by and large trying to figure out how little work they can get away with, right? How little investment that they can put into their assignments. There's a saying that college is the only consumer good in America that the less you get for your money, the happier you are, right? It's like there's some class that is a required class that you have to take, and you're talking to your friend. You're like, I got to take this class next semester. Who should I take it with? And they'll say, oh yeah, take it with Benton, right? Like I never showed up for class, tests are right off the slides. Like I basically didn't do anything, and I got a B+. It was great. I mean, yeah. Would you go into a restaurant? Amazing things on the menu, and you have an opportunity to sample a whole lot of things. And so you order a bunch of stuff, you bring it to the table, and the next day you're telling your friend about it, like, yeah, I went to Chez Jacques, right? And they had all this amazing stuff on the menu, and I ordered the sampler, and a whole bunch of stuff came, and I didn't touch it. It was great. I paid $100 and I didn't eat a bite. It was so amazing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about this whole impression that, people come to college and don't invest in learning more about who they are and what they want to be. But back to your original question, I started teaching at the college level in 2001. Something I've observed over the years is that new or young or inexperienced teachers are very gung-ho. They're very idealistic. They have these notions that this semester is going to be amazing. Like I'm going to get all of my students super excited and they're all going to just do amazing things. And you try to write the perfect syllabus, right? You try to come up with the perfect grading scale with the right number of points, with the right weight and the right structure and schedule and stuff, so that people will rise to your level of expectation. And then when it doesn't happen, the next time around, you're like, okay, it's because I didn't make enough rules. And so you make more rules, right? And you make stricter like attendance policy. And if you miss one, it's this many points. If you miss two, it's this many points. Your rules get more and more intricate and your whole structure gets more and more narrow. And so the same thing happened with me the first few years that I was teaching. I was teaching undergraduate courses while I was in grad school. The subject of my dissertation was how to help teachers write better multiple choice questions, right? And I wrote a web app where if you were a teacher, you could log in and you could add your questions, and it had scaffolding. It had sort of like a whole bunch of suggestions that would help you theoretically write a better question. I had a fellowship at ETS, which used to stand for Educational Testing Service. That's the not-for-profit that makes the SAT and the GRE and a bunch of other big standardized tests. They're like one of the major powerhouses in standardized testing. And I spent a summer in their research division in Princeton. If you want to be a psychometrician, right? Psychometricians are the people who study psychometric, right? Psycho meaning psychological properties or phenomena, and metric meaning to measure, right? So psychometricians spend their lives trying to figure out how can we measure psychological phenomena. For example, and a big one is learning, right? Learning is not a thing that you can observe directly. If I put water in a pot and I turn on the burner and I heat it up, I could stick a thermometer in there and I can directly observe the temperature rising, right? That's a form of measurement that is directly observable. I can, and when it gets to the boiling point, I can see the bubbles rising, right? That's directly observable. But when you learn something, there's no thermometer that I can stick under your arm or under your tongue and pull it out and say, oh yeah, you learned, 17 today. I can't open up your skull and look inside and see that it's more full today than it was yesterday or before you came into class. Learning is something that has to be observed indirectly. And because our culture has become so focused on metrics, on numbers in particular, right? Being able to assign values to things, that in a sense become hoodwinked by a fantasy that the numbers that they assign to your papers and your tests and your things actually mean something that's useful or interesting. And in reality, they really don't. I think the book that gave me the biggest boost, right, the most courage, was a book called Punished by Rewards. It's written by a guy named Alfie Kahn, Kohn. First edition he wrote back in 1992. He did a revision, I think, like 1997, 1998, right around there. I think he was a teacher, a high school teacher, and he is one of the most concrete academic writers I've ever read. And his writing style is very accessible, very, very easy to follow. And he basically just went through the science. He went through the psychological literature, the economic literature, like the education, the psychometric literature. He went through all of it to demonstrate that rewards and punishments are not the way to foster learning or really any kind of behavior that you want to see repeated. And so I read his book, and that just, that blew my mind. And I remember I read it during winter break in, I want to say 2009. So January of 2009, when I started the spring semester with a section of 252, which is my introductory programming class, that was my first real effort to do no grades. And originally my plan was there are not going to be any intermediate grades, no graded tests or assignments or things that you have to complete by a certain point in time. But at the end of the semester, you have to turn in a portfolio, and the portfolio will be graded, that, a grade that I choose, that I decide. And I don't know whether it was that particular group of students, or it was my enthusiasm, or the stars just aligned, or what. But that semester, the performance of those students was phenomenal. In fact, like 2 or 3 weeks into the semester, people were just doing stuff that was just blowing my mind. It was they'd made way more progress as a whole, as a class, than any class I'd ever seen take intro programming ever. And so about 2 or 3 weeks into the class, I was really close friends with my TA, a guy named Brian. I was bubbling to Brian about how excited I was about this class. And Brian was like, Morgan, they're not doing it because they're enjoying it. Because I thought people were enjoying it. I thought people were enthusiastic and excited, just really, motivated to just learn something and to do something new. And Brian's like, no, Morgan, that's not why they're acting that way. they're acting that way because they know you're grading them at the end of the semester. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're into it. And he's like, yeah, they are. I'm like, no, they're not. Yeah, they are. No, they are. We went back and forth. I said, fine, I'll prove it to you. So the next day I went into class and I was like, Brian says you guys are just doing this for the grade. I think he's wrong. So I'm changing my grading policy this semester. You don't have to do anything. And at the end of the semester, I will report to the registrar whatever grade you tell me. No strings attached. There's one string attached. The one string attached is you have to come meet with me and tell me face to face what grade that you want me to report to the registrar for you. And they blew it out of the water. It was an amazing semester, and I was terrified. You know, I still didn't have tenure yet, and I was worried about what my colleagues would think, and I was worried that the students would leave and go away. You don't really truly appreciate how much power you have as a teacher until you voluntarily give it up. I mean, I told them there'll be no penalty if you don't show up, and still everybody showed up. If they're only showing up because of the grade, right? If they're only showing up to avoid losing points, then when the threat of losing points went away, that would mean that they should just not come. But they still came. It also means that I don't have leverage anymore to force them to do things, right? So there are some classes in our department that are notorious for having lab reports on which people will spend 10, 12, 14 hours a week, every week, working on just one lab report for this one class. That doesn't account for the hours they spend actually going to class and doing other assignments and tests and things. Like, they spend an enormous amount of time in these other classes. And a big part of the reason that they spend so much time in those classes is because they're terrified that they're going to get a bad grade if they don't. That's not a good way to learn.
There's like intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, and all these external rewards and punishments can kind of diminish your intrinsic motivation, right? So by doing that, you're kind of allowing the students to get back on their own path and find some sort of internal meaning in what they're doing, right? And it seems like companies have slowly started to catch on to this with, like, Google has a 20% time, right? Where employees can work on their own stuff. So by allowing students to have one course of their 5 kind of be open-ended, sometimes like yours, maybe that you're giving them that 20% time in their education, right? And they probably, I at least really appreciated having the flexibility to go learn what I wanted to learn and build what I wanted to build instead of someone cracking the whip on me. And it just ruins it. You can't, it's almost impossible to be intrinsically motivated when there is that punishment and reward system set up over your head. Even if you wanted to learn the subject going into it, it's going to slowly get diminished by jumping through all the hoops, you know?
Right. One of the mistakes I made, because, you know, that book I was telling you about by Alfie Kahn, Punished by Rewards, is specifically about that whole difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. That book and a lot of the research in this area is rooted in, well, a number of different researchers, but one of the main ones, a guy named Ryan and DC, and they're, I think, at University of Rochester, or were, and they came up with a theory that they call SelfDetermination Theory, in which they talk about intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation, and the 3 components of that, which are autonomy, right? The ability to make choices for yourself about, you know, what you do, when you do it, how you do it. Connection or relation, you know, so sort of like your relationship to people and the content and the stuff. And then competence, or feelings of success, right? Because if you fail and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail, and you never have any, even like small wins in anything, you're probably not going to fall in love with it, right? You're probably not going to get to that point where that just becomes a part of who you are and what you do. I read Alfie Kahn's book. I came away from it with an overly simplistic view about motivation as either intrinsic or extrinsic, but it really isn't quite that simple. Intrinsic motivation is pretty much like doing things for the sake of doing them, but extrinsic motivation has a number of different flavors, right? So there are things I will only do because I'm forced to do them. But then there are things that I will never find intrinsically satisfying, but I understand the reasons why you should do them, right? So for example, I'm so jealous of people who like, I know you're like into fitness and exercise, and I'm so jealous of people who are like that, because intellectually I understand the pleasure people get out of that. And I understand the psychological benefits. I understand the physiological benefits. I understand the emotional benefits of being fit and healthy and exercising regularly. But I'm just not intrinsically motivated to do that. I don't ever have the thought like, I should go hike, or I should go for a run or a bike ride. Those thoughts never occur to me. Like, it is not something that I will ever, I won't say ever, but it's something I am not intrinsically motivated to do. And as such, right, the reason that I would do it would be to achieve the reward, right, of better health, right? That is an extrinsic motivation, but it's not, I mean, like, you wouldn't call that evil. There's nothing sinister about that. So one of the things I failed to appreciate at the beginning was that just because something is extrinsically motivated doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or inferior. Bribing kids to read books, right? If you read books, you can have pizza, right? A pizza party, something, stuff that they do in like elementary and middle schools to get kids to read books. Those have been proven to not work because you take away the pizza and they don't want to read a book, right? The reward for reading a book should be another book, right? You should reward behavior with the opportunity to do more of it.
In the book I read, they said that external motivators are good for like repetitive tasks, which is why I think they got kind of embedded in society during like the industrial age. So for exercise, that might be like a boring repetitive task, and an external motivator like health or living longer or whatever it may be, I don't, like you were saying, it's not a bad thing. I think the problem really comes with creative solutions and complex problem solving, which is more in line with like your teaching in school. If you say, hey, you can have pizza if you build this app, that pressure, you're not going to be able to creatively solve those problems the same way. So I think fitness is just a total different, it's a different ball game. I think you can externally trick yourself into being fit more than you can trick yourself into like an intellectual pursuit, for sure. So yeah, I guess it's not all bad.
You read Dan Pink's book?
Yeah. I'm reading one of his books right now. Drive. Yeah. I read his book. Yeah. That's the one I'm kind of grabbing on. That's funny that you recognized it.
Yeah, I really like that book. I can't stand Daniel Pink.
Yeah, it was kind of simple. I don't know. It wasn't mind-blowing read. I got a similar amount out of his TED Talks and stuff.
Okay.
He dove a little bit further in the book,
I mean, he definitely backs up what he says in the book with the research, which is really important. It's really important that the things that we say are grounded in actual empirical observations of people and the way that they actually behave in the world. And I really like Drive, and I like that RSA talk that he does, the one that's animated with someone drawing on a whiteboard as he's talking about motivation.
I don't think I've seen that one, but...
Oh, I'll send you the link.
Okay.
The Dan Pink makes, the thing that's really great about him is how he makes topics like that accessible and exciting and understandable to a broader audience. I met him once at a conference, and he's just like a shameless self-promoter. And when you read his books, you kind of come away with the notion that he discovered all this stuff when really he's not a researcher, he's a journalist. So that's my personal gripe.
He's selling the material, maybe not coming up with it, right? He's just packaging up for people like me who don't want to go too far into the studies.
Yeah, I mean, I think they turned Drive into a TV series, right? Where they did a whole bunch of sort of like pranks or tricks on people to get them to do certain things, right? But anyway.
Interesting.
I like Drive. I think it's a good book. I think it's definitely worth the read. And if you only read one book on motivation, that's not a bad one to pick. So
yeah, I obviously was attracted to it for several reasons. It was like the name of my company, so I was like, okay, I'll start here.
Right.
But it is a good beginner spot to start. And yeah, another question I wanted to ask you was, you were a computer programmer and you went to teach ISAT, which is Integrated Science and Technology. You taught computer science within the ISAT program. I was wondering, why did you choose ISAT over becoming just like a computer science professor? what was the thought process there, and why do you kind of like the ISAT program?
My degree is in information systems. Information systems is sort of like the intersection of computer science and social science. So you've got sociology, psychology, political science. You've got all those things on the social science side, business, economics, things like that. Then you got computer science, and information systems is understanding both, how people behave and interact, as well as building technical systems to support and augment and improve the quality of those actions. So that's the background I came from. I applied to a bunch of places. JMU was the place that gave me a call. So I was super grateful to get that job. And when I started at JMU, I had not yet finished my PhD. I was still ABD is what the term they use. It's all but dissertation. I'd finished all my coursework. I'd finished my comprehensive exams, finished my proposal. I just had not actually completed the research and written it up and done all that stuff. And so when I came to JMU, my contract said that I was required to finish my PhD within the first year, or else I couldn't continue. And May 7th of 2007, I walked into my boss's office and I dropped that, 300 or 400 page draft of my dissertation on the table and said, I did it.
What was the dissertation on?
I built a web-based system to help teachers write better multiple choice questions. But I actually don't think multiple choice questions are a good thing. I don't like them. In a lot of ways, the system I built was actually a Trojan horse to convince people that writing a really good multiple choice question is more trouble than it's worth, right? They're great for standardized tests. And, take your SAT or your GRE or any of the standardized tests that are created by professional psychometricians. You would not believe just an astounding number of hours goes into the creation of each question. One question can take days. And there's a certain number of questions on those standardized tests that are actually brand new questions that have not been, they don't actually go into calculating your score because they don't know whether or not they're good predictors of anything in particular. Learning is not something you observe directly. Let's say I wanted to know whether or not you had learned to ride a bike. I can't look at you. I can't give you a paper and pencil test or anything and find that out. I have to observe you actually riding a bike. And that's great for a physical activity, but for, let's say mathematics or the ability to write well or interpret literature, and, any of the sorts of things that we're trying to figure out whether or not people have learned this stuff. We're faced with this problem where if you actually wrote an essay, right, we could sit down and we could talk about it, we could read over it, but that's not an efficient way to do assessment. I can't do that with thousands and thousands of people. There's just not that number of hours in the day. And so we use multiple choice questions because they're super efficient. I can give 10,000 people a multiple choice test and a computer will score it and it's done, right? It doesn't require any more effort. But the question is, are the results that we get from that meaningful, right? Do they actually say anything useful about who you are as a person and what you can do, what you would be like in any sort of real world scenario? Just intuitively, we all know that those kinds of tests have very limited utility, right? Because, with any schoolwork that is graded, maybe you were sick that day, or maybe, your dog died, or your girlfriend broke up with you, or like maybe there's something else going on in your life, right? Or maybe you're just a bad test taker. Maybe you suffer from anxiety or depression, or specifically test anxiety, or maybe you have an undiagnosed ADHD or dyslexia. Like there's so many things that explain your score on a test other than whether or not you actually know the content. And because there's no way for us to know whether your score indicates that you actually know the stuff, or if there's something else, which is the explanation, we just don't have any grounds to interpret it. We don't have any way to say, oh yeah, for sure. I don't know if you've been in a position of having to hire somebody, but you look at a resume, you know, if somebody looked at your transcript, what could they know about you?
Not great things from my transcript.
So your transcript doesn't capture, right, the things that I think, you know, having worked with you closely for, you know, a couple of years, they don't capture the things like you built your first app as a class project where there was no pressure on you to build it in a certain way or to get a certain amount done by a certain period. And you kept working on that. You know, we were working on a capstone, which was unrelated to the fitness app that you were building. But, you know, like at the end of our capstone meetings, you're like, yeah, I have some more questions, because, you know, you wanted to ask me more about like how to, you know, debug this or that, or just tell me that, hey, you got it up on the App Store, or, you know, you got it working on this device or the other. That's not captured in a transcript, right? And there's no test I can give someone that'll help me understand. There's probably not a resume that you could write either that would convey to someone just how much of a hard worker that you are. And once you get in your mind that you're going to do something, how determined you are about seeing that come to fruition. And that was true from the, you know, the project you guys did with the weight tracking system, like the one where you were at the X Labs that summer, not X Labs, Ice House that summer.
Yeah. Is there a better way of grading then? If not multiple choice, is there, or do you see like a future of using like artificial intelligence or some other method to give every student the cultivated test that fits them? Or I don't know what, I get everything
my
you're saying.
conclusion is no. My conclusion is there's not a scalable solution to educational assessment. I think his name is Todd Will, and he wrote a book called, I think it's called The End of Average, in which he tells a great story. He tells actually several stories, but the one that I remember is about how either the Navy or the Air Force, I want to say like the 1930s, they got all of these airmen, you know, all of these pilots. They just assembled a whole bunch of them, and they measured their bodies, right? They measured the length of each joint. They measured the length of their hand. They measured the girth of each finger, and they measured, you know, the length from the wrist to the tip of their finger and their arm length. Like they literally took hundreds of measurement per person, and they did this for hundreds of soldiers. And then they took the averages of those numbers and they used them to design the cockpit for their fighter planes that they thought would be closest to fitting the most number of people, right? And intuitively, that makes sense, right? If we take hundreds of people and we measure them all, and then we take the average of all those measurements, we should get like the average person. And if we design something for the average person, then in general, that thing that we designed should suit everybody pretty well, because we have this notion that everybody is, you know, average in some respects and not average in other respects, above average, below average. And, you know, if you're talking about height or weight or intelligence or whatever, we know from measuring that, you know, people are distributed normally throughout society on these various characteristics. Turns out that those cockpits that they built, they were having many, many accidents in these fighter planes because these cockpits were not well designed. Like maybe somebody was average in height, but their arms are a little bit shorter, and so they had more difficulty reaching the throttle or whatever, the, you know, the controls in the airplane. Turns out that the seats are really poorly designed for the actual pilots that came and sat in the planes, even though they had done so much work. The conclusion that they come to in the book, right, by Todd Will comes to, is that when you design for everybody, you really are designing for nobody, because there are no average people. Everybody is unique. Everybody is different. And testing, by its very nature, is designed for an abstract average person, right? Like if I design my syllabus at the beginning of the semester, before I met you, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your life has been like. I don't know what trajectory you've chosen to take going forward. It's really difficult for me to design lectures in a way that are going to appeal to you, that are going to excite you, that are going to motivate you, or assignments, or any of those things, or even assessments, right? And so we guess, and that's the accepted practice. As professors, we guess what our students are going to be like based on our past experiences, and we design a syllabus that's sort of designed to capture the average student. And then people come and they take the class, and it's only marginally effective most of the time because most people are not average.
So I hear you. So, but is there like a future in which we design dynamic syllabuses? For instance, our social media apps, they get to know us over time. Like my Facebook knows what ads to give me because they know my preferences, right? So could we design like an education system where you go in and immediately, it starts learning things like, oh, are you a visual learner? Are you an audio learner? Or do you like tests? Do you like group projects? And like slowly start feeding you the right assignments for you. And it's like a program instead of a syllabus where it learns who you are and what your learning preferences are and what your interests are and guides you through education in a different way instead of saying, hey, here's this course that we laid out for you. Can we change that around to be like, hey, year one, we're going to learn who you are. And then year two, it's going to be this upgraded education that's cultivated for you, is that
right?
And I think the online learning allows us to move in that direction. If you recorded 100 lectures, then you could give the student the 10 that best fits his needs next semester, or you could just give him one of Dr. Raswell's lectures.
I like the menu approach. So yes, there's an enormous amount of content out there. You've experienced it, right? You know that there's just not enough hours of lecture time in any course in any semester to really learn how to write code in any meaningful way, right? If you only went to class, that would never be enough for you to learn it, right? You have to spend hours and hours on your own time invested in working in it and learning it. And that's going to be different for different people. Code is a great example, right? Because there is so much great content out there for learning how to write code. And there are all those things that you just explained or that you just described, right? There are videos, there are books, there are online lectures, there are quizzes and tests that you can take if you like them. There are places where you can go to do, there are tutorials, there's collaborative environments that you can get involved in writing code with other people. There are a lot of different ways for you to get engaged with it. And I've been using that in my classes and saying, I use the time in my lecture to try to be a cheerleader, to try to paint a picture of what your life could be like if you knew how to do this stuff, to get you to the point where you're excited to do it. But I don't think this scales, right? I don't think it's, like I said, I have 60 students this semester and I'm exhausted. It's just not the same as ads that are tailored to your preferences. The ads that you see are based on the things that you've seen in the past, right? So like I watch YouTube just a ridiculously large amount of time, but I'm really careful about what I click on because I don't want to mess up my feed, right? I don't want, because I know from past experience that if I'm curious about something and if I click on some video that's completely outside of the sort of scope of the things that I normally watch, that all of a sudden I'm inundated with a whole bunch of videos that are about that thing. And so, I'm really careful about what I click on because the algorithm that YouTube uses to choose what to present to you is based on your past behavior. And to a certain extent, I mean, they sort of like they do like a mesh, right? So they find other people who watch similar things to what you watch. And then they find things that those people have watched that they seem to have liked that you haven't watched yet. And they say, hey, other people like you watch this thing. Maybe you want to watch it too. And to a certain extent, that will allow them to present you with things that may be outside of your comfort zone or outside of your interest areas, but not that far. To my knowledge, there's not anything where they just randomly choose something that just is not at all like anything you've ever watched before or any of the other people who are like you.
Mm-hmm.
They don't show you stuff like that. And with education, part of the purpose of education is to introduce you to things that you never ever in a million years would have thought of doing. I used to do a questionnaire at the beginning of every semester, and I would ask students, what's a class that you took that you thought you were going to love it and you ended up hating it? And what's another class that you took that you thought you were going to hate it and you ended up loving it? Mm-hmm. And it's always fascinating to me to hear the stories people tell. When I went to college, I thought I was going to be pre-med, right? I was going to be a doctor, sure about that. And I got into freshman year and I took chemistry and physics. I hated chemistry. I was so boring. I really just did not like chemistry. And so I quickly dropped, my ambitions of becoming a doctor because, I never even got to biology. A well-structured education will intentionally force you into areas where you're not comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Will get you to give things a try that you otherwise wouldn't have. The Integrated Science and Technology degree program, right, that you graduated from. The ISAT degree program starts out by giving people biology, chemistry, physics, calculus, statistics, a little bit of networking, a little bit of programming, and some social science, and some economics, and some ethics and history. A little bit of a whole bunch of things. And at the upper level, you combine all those things together to solve problems in alternative energy or biotechnology, disciplines that cut across traditional disciplines. And so the programming is one of those things. And, a lot of people come to our degree program specifically because they're interested in doing something for the environment, right? They want to be involved in the environment, or they want to be involved in biotechnology. Our major was the one that was closest of all the majors that we offer at JMU to the thing that they wanted to do. And then they have to take my class. They didn't sign up for computer science. They didn't want to be a programmer. They don't even really like computers all that much. They definitely don't want to spend their time sitting in front of a computer all the time. And they have to take my class. And so I don't want that to be an unpleasant experience for those people who come into my class, with the belief that they could never be good at programming and that they would never like programming and that programming is really hard, or, people come into the class with all kinds of different beliefs about what it's really like. My goal is to get you to try the new food that you've never tried before. It's kind of exotic. It's kind of out there, but maybe you'll like it. Food is a really great metaphor for that. There's so many different kinds of food from all over the world that some of them everybody loves, and some of them are things that are very much an acquired taste, and they take a while. And you might not develop a taste for them unless somebody that you know and trust says, hey, you should really try this. Mm-hmm. I know you didn't like it the first time, but you just got to give it some time, right? And then, and if you trust that person, then you'll stick with it long enough to the point where you can definitively say, yeah, I really like that thing, right? Whether it's coffee or beer or sushi or whatever, right? Those are things that people don't necessarily like the first time that they try them, and they acquire a taste for them. Same thing is a really well-done education will expose you to and convince you to stick with topics that are outside of your comfort zone, outside of your sphere of experience, long enough to develop an informed opinion about whether or not maybe that's something you would like to do. As an undergrad, I majored in sociology. I'd never even heard of sociology when I went to college. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I ended up getting a bachelor's in sociology. And this is a very long-winded way of saying that I don't think AI is going to be the solution for coming up with tailored syllabi or being able to execute education at scale, right, in an automated way. I think education is most effective and it's best when you have somebody that cares about you, that gets to know you, that spends the time with you to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, that learns enough about you to know that, like that first class we took together, right? And you worked on your fitness app. A normal software development class, the instructor would have told you what program you were going to write. That's not my approach. My approach was, I know there's something that you like to do out there. and I'm almost positive there's some problem related to it that we could solve with technology. You pick something that you care about, and let's build software. Let's build some software to make that better, or solve a problem, or scratch an itch, right? And I remember a student I had in a class one semester. She was a computer science student who was taking my class sort of as an elective, and she's like, I've been taking programming classes since, high school, and nobody ever asked me what I wanted to program before until I took your class. And that's why I don't think it's going to work at scale, right? Education is too personal. To really take the risks, I think, that lead to effective learning experiences, it's not necessary, but I think it's more pleasant and more effective if you can do it in an environment where you feel safe, where you trust the people around you, and you know that, okay, I'm going to try to make this app, and maybe at the end of the semester, I will utterly fail and it won't do anything. If you're worried that you're immediately going to get smacked with a bad grade, essentially conveying to the world that you're subpar, substandard in some meaningful way, then you're not likely to take those risks. You're not likely to sort of open up to it and begin to put your heart into it, really. And that's why I don't think it's going to. I don't think that there are any silver bullets. That comes from a place where I didn't always believe that, right? I used to think that there were things that we could do that would allow us to provide high quality teaching at scale. Really, I think it comes down to the relationships. Now, that's not to say that there aren't ways that I think technology could be used to improve education, because there absolutely are. And I think that technology is used well when it allows us to, where it takes the busy work off our plates. Right. So get rid of all of the record keeping and anything that's not you and me talking to each other, solving problems together, figuring things out. The more crap that we can cut away from the things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis so that we can really focus on the stuff that's meaningful, the better. And I think there are ways that we can use technology to do that. Right. Flipped classroom is a great example of that. Right. So the one-way communication, you don't have to be sitting in a room with me for me to tell you about how to build a mobile app, right? You can watch a video about that just as easily. And the time would be better spent with you coming in with the mobile app that you're trying to build and the place that you're stuck, and me helping you walk through how to get unstuck. That's a much better use of our time. Or you coming in and saying, you know what? I don't know what mobile app I want to build. And we have a conversation about that, right? But, given a classroom full of 20 people, they're all going to be different, right? They're all going to want to build software that does different things, that solve different problems. Or there's going to be a handful of them who don't know what software they want to build. And then there's another handful that are like, this is so not a priority for me right now. I've got these other things that are just more pressing for me right now. And I don't want to spend any time or energy on this. I'm not in a place where I can do that. And we should be able to honor that and organize our days in ways that allow us to have the highest level of meaningful interaction with one another that we can.
We were kind of talking about the ISAT program. I think the ISAT program does a great job of being flexible and pushing you in a couple different directions, right? I did take a coding class in the computer science major before ISAT, and it's a weaning out class, and they weaned me out. I mean, It was pretty tough. Then later on, I kind of rediscovered coding through ISAT, and it wasn't as aggressive. And, I think that something that you do that maybe almost no other teachers do, right, is you seem to be taking into account the other courses that students are taking. Like you said, you're not living in this universe where your course is the only thing that matters, and you're not understanding, because I actually really liked computer science once I was given the space to explore it. But through this weeding out class, I really wasn't given the room to learn. And I had a hard semester that semester. If I didn't go to ISAT, I would have never discovered a passion for coding. I would have never discovered a passion for maybe technology, because I took one technology class and it was just kind of aggressive and time consuming. And I was like, oh, I don't have time for this, right? Because I'm a human with other things going on in my life. And yeah, I do think that if we're going to stick to the traditional methods, the interdisciplinary, like ISAT, ISOM, I know some schools have that. They do allow for like a second stage of like gen ed almost, like narrowing it down a little bit more, giving you that space to bump into some subjects that you don't like, go to some subjects you do like, because you ask your ISAT students, what's one course that you love that you should have hated, or vice versa. I mean, a student that goes into like a physics major, right? That's their major. They don't ever get that wiggle room to run into subjects that they love or hate, or, you know, that push them in different directions. In the ISAT formula, I do think that it is probably one of the best systems, right? That AI couldn't do too much to improve it, right? You wouldn't want to mess it up too much by trying to, because then I wouldn't have taken certain classes that pushed me or I didn't like. If it was just an algorithm, like a YouTube feed that showed me stuff I liked, it wouldn't have been as good of an education than if I was forced to take a couple of those classes that I didn't think I was interested in, but maybe I did become interested in later, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, cool. Let's see. Some other things I was thinking we could talk about is, back when I was in your course, there was a lot of emphasis on the Internet of Things, which was one of the subjects that inspired me the most and I found the most interesting. Obviously, I'm kind of designing my company around the idea of one day tracking all of your exercise equipment automatically through putting sensors and equipment and things. And through your and Dr. Raswell's classes, there was a lot of discussion of the smart cities of tomorrow, right? You know, building society from the ground up with basically sensors everywhere that could help us just manage like everything, you know, all the resources and things. So what have there been any like cool studies come out in the Internet of Things world? Is there any just cool updates or stuff that has changed since I came through?
There's been a lot of advancement in the accessibility and the ease of use of microcontrollers. So I'm sure you're familiar with the website Adafruit. It's a site for makers, right? And Lady Ada, the person who founded and created the company, she's amazing. And she has, from day one, focused on learning as a huge driver. A big part of their site is things that you can make, right? Things that light up, things that respond to the environment, right? The IoT devices. Then she sells the little components that you need to make them. But she recognized, for example, that the Arduino programming language, which is based on C++, it's not the easiest language for people to learn when they're first getting started out. And that has the effect of maybe turning people away from getting into designing devices. And so there's I think it's called Circuit Python or MicroPython. There's a slimmed down version of Python that she and her company is building devices that are compatible with this programming language, is super accessible to people to get involved. So the little microcontrollers, they've gotten cheaper, they've gotten more powerful. It's gotten easier to program in them. Digital assistants, things, Alexa, Google Assistant, those digital assistants have become more advanced. People are getting more comfortable with them. They're getting more familiar with them. And the infrastructure for tying devices into the internet have gotten a lot better. There's a company called Particle, and they sell a whole bunch of little microcontrollers that are, they're like $20 or $30 for one little thing, but it can connect to either cell network or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. And, you can program it to do a certain thing, and then you can connect it to another website, IFTTT, which is if this, then that is what IFTTT stands for. IFTTT is basically just a place where you can connect a device to a controller of some sort. So when this thing happens, make this other thing happen. If this thing happens, then make this thing happen. So for example, like I used one of those little Particle microcontrollers, connected it to an LED strip in my office, and then I connected that to the If This Then That website, or it's connected to the Particle website, which is connected to If This Then That, which is then connected to the Google Assistant, like the little Google Home Mini that's sitting on my desk. And so I can walk into my office and I can say, let the light show begin. My Google Assistant will hear that, will send it to the IFTTT site. IFTTT sends it to Particle, which eventually goes through the Wi-Fi at the office. and into my little processor, and the lights come on, right? That kind of infrastructure to build those sorts of things has gotten a lot easier to use, more accessible. The devices have become much cheaper and beginner friendly. It was pretty good when we were doing it, but still wasn't quite as good as it is now.
Yeah, and I guess the whole Google, the input devices, right? Now we all have an Echo or Google, whatever, I don't know what Apple's product is called, but the way we communicate with those devices has changed where you don't necessarily need an app to switch all your lights on and things like that. That I don't think that was even there when I was going through school. Whatever Amazon's product is might have just come out. Alexa, yeah. But it wasn't, it's super popular. Those devices are super popular now. Interesting. What about your capstones? For people who don't know, who are listening to this later, Morgan was also my capstone advisor. We worked on a sensor that would track your breath and then display it in VR. And what was the company we worked with? Juno VR, right?
Yeah, Juno
so
VR.
We worked with a company that made meditation VR simulations, and then we helped tweak a device that they had made for just displaying your breath. And Morgan usually has 4 or 5 capstone projects going at once.
Yeah.
So are there any cool projects you're working on this semester, or how have those even been with the online schooling?
The capstone project, I think, is really the jewel in the crown of our degree program. Mm-hmm. It's like having a grad school experience as an undergrad, right? There are plenty of colleges where as an undergraduate, you have like a 1-semester capstone or maybe a 2-semester capstone. ISAT has a 4-semester capstone, right? You start in the fall of your junior year. You're essentially like speed dating with a whole bunch of different professors to see which one, and other students to figure out, to arrive at a topic that you want to work on and to get matched up with an advisor. And then you have 3 whole semesters plus the summer in between to devote yourself to this project. That's a long time. And I think it's the best thing that we do. I kind of went overboard, and I think maybe the year after you graduated, I think I had 7 projects one year. And
wow.
I overextended myself, and I realized that by taking on too many of those projects, I wasn't able to provide the level of interactivity and guidance and just have as much fun as I wanted to. And so I've kind of stepped back a little bit. So I've only got 1 project right now. We're actually building a mobile app for some other professors in the department. They've come up with a really cool process that I call CARE, CAER, which stands for Creative Anticipatory Ethical Reasoning. And have you ever watched really good sci-fi, like a movie like Demolition Man? It's in a future where instead of being in prison, they freeze people, right? They put them in cryostasis, and then, 30 years go by and then they wake you up again. So Sylvester Stallone is a criminal, Wesley Snipes is a criminal. They get frozen solid for 30 years, and then one of them gets thawed out and they have to thaw out the other one to catch them, right? That's the premise of the movie. But the great thing about good science fiction is that you can really get into the world that is being portrayed by, this future world, and imagine what would it be like if this technology had been perfected? What would a world with perfect automated cars look like? Or what would a world with, ubiquitous sensing be like? So for example, in Demolition Man, nobody swears, right? Nobody uses curse words, because whenever they do, no matter where they are, at home, at work, outside, immediately, a buzzer sounds and a voice says, you've been fined 1 credit for violating the verbal morality statutes. You pay a fine. And so nobody swears, right? And so the thing that's being tested there, what would it be like if we could monitor everybody all the time and take actions to sanction or promote their behaviors in some way, shape, or form? The CARE process that Drs. York and Conley have created is kind of like coming up with good science fiction. In fact, they create these things that they call design fiction. They take groups of people through a process where they try to imagine what would it be like 20, 30, 40 years from now if we could have space travel, or we could understand gene therapy to the point where we could design babies, or, cure huge diseases, or, and try to think about both the positive and negative consequences of those technologies in a future setting, right? Forget all the hurdles and roadblocks and where things are now. Really think creatively about what's going to happen in the future. So they've created this process called CARE, and we're building an app to help facilitate that process, to sort of help put people in groups and keep track of the design fictions that they create and visualize some of the components of the thing.
That sounds really cool. So at first I thought you were trying to make a comparison. This CARE was similar to Demolition Man, but what you're saying is it is a way of generating science fiction ideas in general, right? And they help people create futuristic, not just ideas, but lay out all the positive, negative benefits, all the societal implications of this idea, and try to map out if it's something that we should pursue or shouldn't pursue based on ethical reasoning, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's funny at the end of every podcast, usually it's for people who are more into fitness, but I tend to ask them, what do you think the fitness world is going to be like 20, 30 years from now? And I try to create a little mini what CARE scenario, right, with my podcast guests. So we try to think of, I just want ideas to flow, right? I mean, we try to bounce some cool ideas off each other, but that's I must be kind of tapping into that idea a little bit of just generating or simulating a possible future. And then we try to sit there and think of some negative benefits or positive benefits. Like for one of them, we were talking about, well, should we all just stream ourselves working out? Like people are streaming themselves playing video games. Like maybe everyone should just have a camera in their in-home gym, but okay, well, maybe that's creepy. Maybe there's going to be creepy dudes looking at you, or maybe I don't know what, all the negative implications are, but so their idea is kind of, you're creating an app around ways to shift through all those positive and negative benefits and come up. Does it give like a ethical like score or something to each idea, or what is
it doesn't score things
like?
Let's take a topic like autonomous vehicles, right? So self-driving cars. They put it in the context of drivers. So do we think that people are more likely to own their own autonomous vehicle? People now, everybody has their own car. Most vehicles spend 90+% of their time parked somewhere, probably 95. And if you think about the environmental impact of the millions of cars that are made every year, not just driving them and the gasoline and all the things that the pollution that they put out, but also the energy and the labor and materials that go into building them and disposing of the old ones, right? It's a massive, massive investment of our world's resources. When we have autonomous vehicles that work perfectly, is everybody going to own their own self-driving car? Or will we take advantage of the fact that they're smart to have cars that are shared? And you don't have your own car, you just pay for a transportation subscription the same way you pay for a cell phone subscription. And when you need to go somewhere, a car shows up wherever you are, picks you up and takes you to where you need to go. And those vehicles, we have many, many fewer of them, right? We could probably get by with 10% of the vehicles that we have now, but they would stay in use all the time, all day long, all day, every day, right? We wouldn't need traffic lights. Roads wouldn't have to be as wide as they are now because autonomous vehicles are perfect drivers, and we could take up much less of our landscape with asphalt and pavement. We wouldn't need parking lots. If all transportation was on demand, there would be no parking lots.
That'd be nice.
The car, a car would come pick you up. I say car, like a vehicle of some sort would come pick you up, take you where you go, drop you off, and then it would go off to pick the next person up and take them to wherever they're going to go. You begin to think about, okay, so from what age should you have one? Like, question now is like, how old were you when you got a cell phone? Do you remember?
I was 13, I think, maybe.
Yeah. So was that like a discussion with your parents about whether or not you should have a cell phone? And right. Sure. So if, at what age should you be allowed to get into an autonomous vehicle and go somewhere by yourself? If we had cars that never had accidents and could get you from point A to point B, in perfect safety on demand, that you didn't have to drive, how does that affect the family, right? How does that affect the mobility of people?
What happens with that question? So what age should you be? Is that now we have a place to store that question, or do we poll 20 people and see what these 20 people think?
The way the care process works is that the people who are engaged in the process will usually attack a question like that in a small group of like 3 to 5 people.
Okay.
And they will pick a position, right? So they will say, yes, autonomous vehicles will be mostly shared and not individually owned. And they'll also say that they will be cheap enough that basically any family can afford to get a subscription for all the members of the family. And then they will tell a story, right? They'll essentially, I mean, we're talking about science fiction. They'll tell a story about what the world looks like with that particular set of circumstances that they've chosen to believe will exist in 20, 30, 40 years. Then they'll move back in time. And the next question is, all right, so for us to get to that future, what has to happen between now and then, right? Like, what are the conditions that lead to that being the norm in this future society? What historical things have to happen moving forward for us to get to a point where, right? Does gasoline have to get outrageously expensive? Does, renewable energy have to get ridiculously cheap? Does the computing have to get really small? Does it have to get big? Do governments have to get more powerful or less powerful? So many questions.
Maybe they decide that a company like Uber shouldn't own all the cars or whatever, and that the government should provide this service. Well, then you go back in time. Well, we need to put a government regulation entity in place 15 years before this technology is even available in order to make sure that, right, the power gets put in the correct place, or something along those lines of how to like lead into the future that you want it to go, right? Interesting. Yeah, that's a powerful process. That's cool that they're working on it and that you're also helping them kind of put that into software. It's a mobile app?
This will be this will be a web app.
Cool. Did I cut you off from saying something? I felt like you
No.
You were saying something there.
I can always talk more.
Me too, man. Speaking about talking more, did you want to wrap this up soon, or do you want to keep talking? I don't know how late you were planning on. So
I am curious to know what you're going on with. We have talked a lot about me.
I've told you that I want to eventually build some sort of dumbbell or hardware to track things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm I feel like, the smart bell, right? And you really like that idea, and I haven't been putting a lot of time into that idea right now. So that would be a very fun conversation if I had some specific questions or issues. But I feel like there's some steps I need to take beforehand, which is just getting more workouts into the app and more like educational pieces to the app. So I'm building animations, which basically show you how to do an exercise. I have about like 80 little animated exercises right now. There's about 100 exercises in my database, or no, 1,000. So that's been just a slow process. I kind of got in the weeds there and learned how to animate these guys. And then I've been working with some animator to scale that out, right? And then I was working with someone to put like workout programs into the app, and that kind of fell through. And so I'm at this crossroads right now where I do have some free time. I'm not currently working, but I probably have a couple months until I either need to get a job or profit somehow with Drive, right? So So right now I'm actually getting my personal training certification. And so the plan moving forward is, instead of I signed up for it because I was going to build generic workout plans into the app, right? But instead of doing that, what I'm thinking about doing is providing custom workout plans, like being an online personal trainer, and then like charging like as if I'm just a personal trainer. And that way if I can just get like 10 clients or something, I can just start like a personal training company. And then that'll give me 10 or to 20 like really devoted users, where I can work out all the bugs, still keep all of my time focused on Drive Fitness. But I kind of have to get this personal training certificate and kind of get up and running as a personal trainer. But I feel like that will allow me to keep everything kind of in line in life and keep working on this, because it was a really hard 2 years when I was like working in tech support doing this at home. And so I'm hoping I can kind of sustain myself. That would be the plan. But I came up with that plan like a week ago, and my shit changes every week. Like, I don't know. I'm just not like, I don't know what next week is going to bring sometimes. But I did pay for that class. I'm taking the NASM certification right now. So, and whether I'm going to just say screw it and go back and get a tech job or not, I'm going to be certified to do personal training. But yeah, I don't know if maybe no one's going to want to do online personal training, and I'm not sure if I would want to go work for a gym necessarily. That seems like too far off of the route I'm heading on. But yeah, if I can get people interested in maybe doing some online, like I'll set up workout programs for them online.
Yeah.
If there's a market for that, if people will pay for it, then obviously that's got to be my main focus. And then, once the app is running with users, and that also, by the way, it takes out the smart tracking situation in general. Because if I'm meeting with you on a weekly basis and I'm setting up what you're going to do, then there's no need for the smart equipment necessarily. But then if that goes well and I want to scale out those programs, then maybe I can get going on the smart equipment. But I don't know. I feel like it might be, it's still going to be some time before I can even get started on that idea. I got to make money first.
So I think there's a lot of parallels with the stuff that we talked about tonight and what you're talking about doing, right? Everybody's body is unique. And as a trainer, if you come meet with me, when you're first getting to know one of your clients, you got to know, right? Were they in a car accident and they had, a neck injury at some point? Or how flexible are they? Or are they more of a swimming person or a jogging person? Or are they a weightlifting kind of person or a yoga kind of person, right? Like, is their goal to just be healthy and fit, or is their goal to be ripped and cut? Everybody's different, right? And so, you were talking about developing generic workout plans. People aren't generic. And the reason that I would hire a physical trainer is because they would tailor something to me, not just my current level of fitness, but also my personality and my likes and dislikes.
One cool thing too is that then I can actually tailor the app since I'm the programmer of the app too. I can start tailoring like the challenges and the way the data is displayed. I can tailor. I think that's going to be what I'm offering, is like I can tailor everything for you almost.
Yes.
It's going to be a cool thing.
If you could set up the app, so as a physical trainer, the thing that limits your income is the number of clients that you can work with, right? And the amount you can charge that client for an hour. If you have some famous actor as your client, maybe you can get by with having only one client, right? Who pays you enough money to only work with them. But most physical trainers, you're limited, right? If you work 40 hours a week and you spend an hour with each client, you can at most see 40 clients. And so your income is going to be limited by the number of hours in a day you have. If you can make an app that allows you to provide high quality, tailored fitness experiences for your clients without as much of your time being monopolized by each individual appointment, I think that's where you'll see the scalability factor. The metaphor that I use in teaching is the technology that I built for teaching is designed to help me keep my fingers on the pulse of the class. And I like that metaphor because it's like, I'm staying in physical contact. Keep my finger on the pulse. Like I have to touch the people in the class. Is their pulse beating fast? Is it beating slow? Is it non-existent? And how can I tailor what I do as an instructor to what their current state of being is to make this learning experience better for them? And it's almost a one-to-one, right? Like as a physical trainer, you're going to have people who they've hired you because their doctor told them that they don't exercise, they're going to die, right? You'll have people that hired you because they want to get in shape for their wedding, or they want to, or for this vacation that's coming up, or, there's just so many different reasons why people would hire you. If I hired you, it would be because if I didn't hire you, I would do nothing. Like I would sit in front of my computer all day long. What I would want from you would be to figure out a way to get inside my head and get me to a place where essentially I don't need you, right, anymore, to be able to maintain a regimen that keeps me feeling good and looking good and being good, right? Just coming at it from with the idea that everybody's different. What you as a person are good at is quickly determining, like, you can look at a person and talk to them, and in just a couple of minutes you can make a whole bunch of decisions about what things will suit them and not suit them that would be extremely difficult to do with AI. Right?
Yeah.
And think about what are the things that take up time that are automatable, right? Like deciding what exercises to do, that could be automated, right? Or like how many reps to do, or even like, last time I went to the gym, you would walk around with a clipboard and you would write down the number of reps you did of each, so you write down what machine you were on, how many, what weight you did, how many reps you did, how many sets you did. That was tedious, right? And you have to go find the clipboard and you have to find your sheet in the file cabinet.
But yeah,
there are lots of things that you could, lots of sorts of information that you can provide to people to help you know them better so that you can give them a more tailored, more engaging experience.
Yeah, just like in the classroom, right? You were finding ways where you could, I could post this lecture, I can do certain things that allow me to be more productive, right? I do think that we can flip it in a way where you meet with me once a week and I set up your whole week's worth of your workout programs, and I don't need to follow you around and watch everything that you do.
Right.
There is the whole form. Like I might have you send me videos through the app on like what your form is, because that's important. But as far as like what you're doing, if we can establish that you have good form, even maybe not even once a week, maybe we can meet once a month and I can absorb a month's worth of data right through all sorts of things through the app, and then set up your next month or your next 2 weeks, wherever you're at as a client, right? And and trainers can have this dashboard that business analysts kind of look at, like things like that, where you can make more educated and you can make more decisions in a quicker amount of time, and hopefully set that up on the app, right? And I think that COVID is going to give me that opportunity where this thing doesn't seem like it's dying down, soon. And I'm sure I think that there is a market for people that don't want a trainer breathing on them at the moment, I mean, this conversation is proof, right? We would have totally met in person if we could. So maybe the vaccine will come out right as I get my certificate and I'll get messed up. But I think that there might be a window here that wouldn't be great. But there is a window here, I think, where there is a demand for online training, and maybe that can actually be better, kind of like the reverse classroom situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, that seemed to tie everything up pretty nicely.
Awesome.
Do you have any final words or final just maybe advice that you give students interested in computer science or programming? Or
don't be afraid of it and scratch your own itch, right? Find out the thing that you care about and just begin to dream about ways that you could incorporate tech into your passion, and it'll flow, it'll come. Part of what keeps me in teaching is conversations like this one, right? What year did you graduate?
2018.
2018, right? So it's only been 2 years, but still, like, it's nice to keep up with the people that I've gotten to know, and the range of people that I stay in contact with on a day-to-day basis who come from my capstones in the past and classes that I've taught in the past, or even people who just pop up from time to time to say, hey, that experience we had together was really meaningful and changed my life in an important way. That's really rewarding for me. So,
Well, I'm definitely one of those people, because I don't keep up with any other professor. And then you really did have a huge impact on my life, and I learned so much and was very inspired in your classes. So thank you so much for continuing to teach me, right? Thank you so much for continuing to meet up with me and teach me things as I go through this startup journey, right? You've been one of the best resources I have. So thank you, for real.